6, verse 1, we see that he is now heading home. Isn't that a good feeling? When you've been out and you've been out on a journey, especially when it's been a very successful journey, normally, isn't that a good feeling to be able to come home? You would think that it would be, but things didn't turn out so good. Look at verse 2. He's there on the Sabbath, and you probably know the answer without even looking at verse 2. What does he do on the Sabbath day? What do you do on Sunday? Yeah, you go to church, I hope. But he goes to worship there, and he begins to teach and everything. That was the custom. He's a teacher, and they come in and invite the guest speakers to come in and speak. But notice the response there. Verse 2. What is the response when he comes in and he starts teaching them and talking to them? What was the response?
They were amazed.
Yeah, I love that they are amazed at his wisdom. And I can only imagine. I can only imagine what it must have been like to be able to listen to him talking in the flesh and everything. But they were amazed at his wisdom and the works that he'd been doing, all the miracles and everything that had been going on. And so they've got a question. Okay, is he human or is he divine? I mean, they're struggling with this question. Look at verse 3. What is the problem that they're having there? They've got a problem with it. When they know about all the miracles and everything he's done. They hear the wisdom that he has when he's teaching. What's the problem that they have? Yeah, they know the guy. They know where he came from and everything. That they knew him. They had grown up with him, some of them. They knew his family. He can't be the Son of God. He can't. We know his mom and dad were. So he really can't be the Son of God here. Listen, there's a lot of people that would be amazed that I went to school with. They would be in total shock if they knew I was a preacher now. That kind of thing. Bill Say, a good friend of ours, who was a mafia leader. I mean, the real mafia, who was the real mafia leader at one time. He wasn't our good friend when he was in the mafia, when he was doing that. But after he became a Christian, people would run into him and they couldn't believe it. And so they're really having a hard time. A carpenter is a good, respected position, but they don't expect a carpenter to be doing the kind of miracles that he's doing here. And so here's the problem they're having. They can't deny his wisdom. They can't deny the miracles that he's doing, that they've seen that, but they can't accept him as being divine either, and so they can't do it. Look in verse 4, how he responds. And so Jesus said to them, and this is quoted often, this verse, a prophet is not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house. And so he wasn't accepted when he came home and everything. Now go on to the next verse there in verse 5. Something I say over and over and over again. I like to remind people that actions have consequences. You can choose your actions, but what can you not choose? The consequences to those actions. And so they made a choice here. They made a choice in not accepting Jesus for who he is. And it's really a bad choice. Look at verse 5. Is Jesus able to do a lot of mighty works there in verse 5? No, he doesn't do them. And so he's going to leave because they're not going to accept him for who he is and everything. And understand, it's hurting other people as well. They made the choice not to accept him. It didn't just hurt them personally, but it hurt all the other people, that could have been helped and everything was there. Look at verse 6. Jesus marveled. I like calling it Jesus marveling about something. What did he marvel about?
Their unbelief.
Let that hit home. Let that hit home. Do you want Jesus to marvel about you in some way? I would like to think that he would. I can't imagine him doing it. But I love that he would marvel. But I don't want him to marvel at my unbelief. I mean, that's just kind of hard to grasp in everything like that. And so Jesus, he leaves and everything. And I know it must have really, really been hard when he was leaving. Now, this takes us to the next section here in verse 7. The passing of the baton. I'm going to read these verses. Y'all kind of follow with me. But pick up in verse 7. This is really neat. Verse 7. And he called the 12 to himself. Got away. He was away from the crowd. Left everyone. Said, okay, y'all gather around. Just his bunch. To himself, and began to send them out 2 by 2. And they all entered into the ark. 2 by 2. Is that what it said? What did they do? Yeah, they were, okay, y'all know this already. And began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them power over unclean spirits. He commanded them to take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bag, no bread, no copper in their money belt, but to wear sandals and not to put on 2 tunics. Also, he said to them, in whatever place you enter a house, stay there till you depart from that place. And whoever will not receive you nor hear you, when you depart from there, shake off the dust under your feet as a testimony against them. Assuredly, I say to you, it will be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah in the day of judgment than for that city. Well, that's harsh. So they went out and preached that the people should repent, and they cast out demons and anointed with oil many who were sick, and they healed them. This is kind of the passing of the baton here. They are sent out to preach. Jesus had been with them for a while. He'd been teaching them and everything. And so now he's going to send them out on their own so that they can preach, they can teach, they can cast out demons in the various cities, because one of these days they're going to be on their own. And so Jesus wants them to develop a little bit by going out and preaching on at this point. You see, is it sad when a child leaves home? Yeah, it is. I remember, gosh, I remember. I remember so well when our daughter got married. That was a really tough day for this preacher. I remember in the church going and standing with her, in the vestibule, waiting for that march down so I could walk my daughter down. And as she grabbed hold of my arm and everything, and I was going to walk her down the aisle, I had pastored this church earlier, but we had gone on to Florida and everything, but she was staying there in that church. So the pastor that was there, he did the first part of it. And so I was waiting to walk her down, and when she grabbed hold, I said, gosh, she has held on this arm so many times when I walk with her, but boy, it's going to be different now after this, because she's going to have another man that she's going to be hanging on to a lot, more than my arm. But I walked her down the aisle, and I was halfway doing okay. The tears started. As soon as I started going down the aisle, I started crying. Y'all know I can be emotional at times. And I started coming out, but I thought I had it together. I really had it. I was doing okay that part. And I got down there. They had a little secret that I didn't know about. Do y'all remember the song Butterfly Kisses in it, y'all? That was popular then. Alex Henderson, dear friend, one of my preacher boys is well now. We love him and his family to death. He has one of the most gorgeous voices. I knew he was going to be singing. They didn't tell me he was singing that. When we got down there at the aisle and we stopped, right before I came down, they said, oh, by the way, there's a song especially for you, Daddy, when you get down at the front. Okay, I lost it. And I cried. Well, they said, who gives her away? And I said, Mom, I do. I don't want to, but I didn't. But I said that, Mom and I turned it took me a few sentences, but before I could ever finish and do the ceremony. But one of the things I told them, and I put in it, that I wrote, I talked a little bit about the fact that our whole lives up to this point, her mom and I have been raising her to do what? Fly the coop, to leave home. You know, we had raised her to do that. And that we were proud, even though. And so Jesus, he had been training them. Oh, by the way, I did tell the guy, right before I pronounced them husband and wife, I bent over and I whispered into my daughter's ear. I said, Mandy, you know how much your mom and I love you. She said, yes, Dad. I said, if you ever have a problem or anything, you need anything at all, you call me, okay? I said, I love you dearly. She said, okay, I love you too. Then I walked around and I got to his ear. I said, fella, because I was still young. I said, fella, you know I'm a Marine, don't you? He said, yes. Do you know that you do know I actually taught hand-to-hand combat? Do you know that? And he smiled. I had a big smile on him. I said, you do know that I taught hand-to-hand combat, don't you? He said, yes, sir. I said, don't you dare lay your hand on her. Hey, I look behind you and I will kick you. And then I said that smiling and everything. They said, what nice thing did you say to him? You know, but anyway, it reached a point. That's what she was supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to do. Jesus had raised his disciples. He had raised them up. He had been training them and said, okay, guys, now it's time that y'all pair up and y'all start going out. Now, the lesson's not complete, but he sends them out for a while. That's what you and I are supposed to do. How long have we been in training? I've been ever since I was 9 years old. I accepted Christ when I was 9 years old. But it comes to the point where we do need to fly the coop sometime. We keep coming and studying and worship, but the time comes that we need to get out and start sharing what we have learned with other people and everything like that. And so that's what's going on. But now something happens, and I'm going to get that doesn't make any sense at all. This really doesn't make sense, and people that try to, discredit the Bible and things like that, they like to jump on this one. At verse 14, I call it a sidebar. And they say this must have been added later because it really doesn't make any sense. It's the death of John the Baptist here. And it really seems to be out of place because Mark suddenly, he's been talking about all that Jesus was doing. And he was talking about how Jesus had sent them out 2 by 2. And you're expecting to hear the results. But all of a sudden, Mark starts talking about John the Baptist. How did that get there? Why did that suddenly come up here? We see Mark had just told them, and this is what I believe happened, and I don't have any questions about this word. Mark was just telling them about the 12 going out 2 by 2 and sharing the gospel and what they're supposed to do if anybody rejects them. But then it clicks in his head. Have you ever been talking about one thing and all of a sudden something clicks? We call it chasing rabbits sometimes. All of a sudden it clicked in his head. It was about the same time that we went out 2 by 2 that John the Baptist got beheaded. It was about the same time that happened. And Jesus, oh, how he mourned over the death. And so he sticks that in. As that memory came back to him, that being about at the same time that they went out. And so look in 14. What does Herod think? He tells the story. What does Herod think when he hears about all the things that John the Baptist is doing, or that Jesus is doing? He heard everything that Jesus is doing, and what does he think?
John the Baptist,
Yeah, John the Baptist back from the dead and everything. Mark calls Herod king. And by the way, Herod wanted to be called king. Technically, he was a tetrarch, and so someone wants to argue that technically he was. That means he had 1/4 of the kingdom under him. It's kind of like you've got the governor, and then you got mayors, on the level below, and everything. But what did he said? Herod thought that it was John the Baptist come from the dead. Verse 15. What did others think? Yeah, they thought Elijah's coming back. the prophet, one of the prophets that they were coming back. But look at verse 16. Herod said that it is John the Baptist, whom I beheaded. He is risen from the dead. He thinks he's come back to condemn him. Do you think his guilt might have been creeping up a little bit? A little bit, and his conscience was bothered. You see, he never admits his guilt, nor does he make any effort to repent from what he does. But I believe when I see this, he's thinking about that a little bit. Look in verse 17, and stay with me. For he himself had sinned, laid hold of John, and bound him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. For he had married her, married his brother's wife. Because John, verse 18, had said to Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. Therefore Herodias held it against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not. For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just and holy man, and he protected him. And when he heard him, he did many things and heard him gladly. You see, I think Herod may have feared John a little bit. He, was afraid that if he kills him, he might stir up a revolt and everything. He recognized him, that he was the holy man that he was, and so I can't kill him. If I kill him, there's going to be a big revolt among the people, but I can stick him in jail. And if I stick him in jail, then he can't harm me and can't do anything to him. Now, Queen Herodias, man, she had one idea in mind. She wanted to kill him. That was it. She wanted him dead. She had a hatred for him. Herod had all the wives and all the women. It was for his taking. Nothing was enough. It didn't matter what woman he got. It didn't matter how much money he got. He was never satisfied, because nothing's going to satisfy the longing of a soul except Jesus Christ. But he had this lust for his brother's wife, which was a direct violation against Mosaic law and everything. And so Herod, who had married King Artaxerxes IV, he had married his daughter, political reasons. He divorces her and then marries his brother's wife. That's all he had to do. Snap his finger and it would be done. He had broke the code of family trust. He even had his own kids killed. I mean, this was an evil guy. Look at verse 21. What time was it? What kind of day? I love what it says in verse 20. Yeah, it was a convenient day. Herod on his birthday. Man, this is neat. It was a royal feast. It was a display of wealth that's going on here. Notice who comes in verse 22. Who comes in? His daughter. Herodias' daughter comes in. His stepdaughter. She comes in. Salome is what history tells us her name is. But what does she do for her dad's birthday? Dance. My little girl danced for me on my birthday before when she was a baby, but I can assure you it ain't a dance like this dance that was being done. Was this an innocent dance that a girl should be doing before her father or anyone else? Absolutely not. There is not a mother. A mother should never have allowed her daughter to do a dance like this in front of a group of men. But when Herod watched that dance, he saw her dancing around and everything. What was his reaction? Did it please him? Oh, yeah, he liked that dance. He really liked that dance. So in verse 22, he repeats it in verse 23, but in verse 22, what does he promise her?
Anything.
How good choice is that? Think about that. Anything. Ask whatever it is you want. I can give it to you. Remember, he's getting drunk. He's drunk at this point from everything that's flowing. He said, you can get anything up to half of my kingdom. We look at this verse and the next verse that's there. Can you imagine what an opportunity this would be for this young lady? What might you be asking for? What would you want? I kind of think things, Look at verse 24. Did she respond immediately when he asked a question? Did she immediately spit out what she wanted? No. No, the gift is so overwhelming. It is so overwhelming, she runs straight to her mom for some suggestions. This girl would have been a whole lot better off. I always tell kids, go talk to your parents, but she'd have been a whole lot better off if she hadn't gone to her mom on this one. Her mom there in verse 24, she is more than eager to help. I mean, she's ready to help her. What did she ask for? What is she going to do with that? Put it on the wall? Put it on the mantle? Put it on the bedpost? What's she going to do with the head? I can't imagine. I can't imagine when I think of all the options. But here's the thing about Herodias. She is not thinking about her daughter. She should have been. When this question comes and she said, you can have anything you want. Man, she immediately starts saying, what will set my daughter up? Because it's a stepdaughter. She's going to make sure that she is well taken care of, but she's not thinking about her daughter. She is acting on her own hatred. Let me see. I can have anything I want, up to 1/2 of the entire kingdom. Let me see. I know what I want. I want a head. I want somebody's head. I don't think so. I'm thinking house car, retirement. So look at verse 25. Did she do what her mom wanted her to do? Yeah. How quick, by the way? Yeah, immediately. It was there, wasn't it? Yeah, immediately, at once, on a platter. And notice that the way it said there, immediately she came in with haste to the king, saying, notice the wording here. I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on the platter. See, you're not going to have time to change your mind when you're sober in the morning. But I want the head at once. You go get it for me right now. Mom probably told her to do it that way and everything. This shows that, something of the influence that the mother had over the daughter. But I can't help but wonder what their relationship was like after this. Did it harm it? Did or anything like that? But it is done. It is a done deal at this point because he had to honor the request. The word oath, it says that he gave the oath or swear. It's actually plural, meaning that he just didn't say one time, ask what you want and I'll give it to you, but he repeated it over and over again. And all the other dignitaries and all the people that were there, they heard him when he said it. He said it probably trying to influence them, but they're probably thinking, this man's lost his mind, when he said it. And then I can only imagine when the request came. But that must have been some dance that she gave them. This young girl, when she got dressed and she walked in to that banquet room that evening, she had no idea in mind what she was going to be dancing for when she began. She thought she was just going in to dance for her dad and those men. But and this is why I tell people, leave alcohol and drugs. Leave it alone. Once her alcohol craves stepfather promised her anything up to 1/2 of his kingdom, then her hate craves, hate filled, hate controlled mother sees her chance. Forget about what my daughter needs, what's best for her. Just give me that head. Just give it to me. How often are things said when a person is drunk that gets them into trouble? How can you do things when you're drunk that gets you into trouble. You know, she actually pulled out being the accomplice to murder. The young girl did. She played her part well. You see how innocent people get drawn in? The mother had the hatred, but now she's bringing, innocent people into the whole mix here. Now she could say, hey, they said dance, I danced. I just did what I was told to do. They told me what to ask for. I just asked for what they told me to ask for. I did what I was told to do. Yeah, you caused a man's death, an innocent man's death, and you can't get away from that. Look in verse 27. What happens next? In the feast, it says immediately send the executioner to get the head. Can you imagine that scene? Go to 28. First, you have John the Baptist. He's sitting in the dungeon. And I can't help but wonder, I don't know how loud the feast was. I imagine it was getting pretty loud and everything that was there. They don't have windows, their houses aren't sealed up, windows be open and all that. I don't know if the dungeon was close enough and they could hear the noise, but he's sitting there and all of a sudden, the executioner and whoever's with him, they come walking down, there in the prison and the noise of, on that stone floor and stone walls, he hears someone coming, and wonder who that is. And then when they arrive, he takes one look and he knows it's the executioner. He says, whoa. And a moment later, his head is separated from his body. I can only imagine what that must have been like down there. And for everybody else that was in the prison who saw it when it was coming, that would have been tough. And what about they're in the banquet room as well? They're used to seeing people coming in and out, carrying the trays with all the food, all of the drinks, and everything else that's on it. But then all of a sudden, they come walking through, carrying the head of John the Baptist. Can you imagine what that would have been like in the banquet? Have you ever been to a banquet where they bring the food in and out? Do they have a head on it? Maybe a pig's head, maybe, but not nothing. Not nothing like that. But they brought it in. I can only imagine, I can't help but wonder if that young lady, when she went to bed that night, thought, I could have had a VA. Yeah, I could have had something else. What was done with the rest of the body in verse 29, as we wind this up? What was done with the rest of the body there in verse 29? Yeah, they took it, the disciples came, they took the body, they laid it into a tomb, and they buried it. Now, and we'll pick up next week, after he inserted, come on up, man. After he inserted that into the text, where he said, oh yeah, it was about the same time that we went out 2 by 2 that this happened. Let me tell you what happened while we were out doing this. Now he gets back to what the original story that he was telling. Brother.
When it comes to our prayer time, I told earlier, when I come in, Carol Davis's mother passed away while in New York. She's got a lot of papers. She had a brother passed, and somebody else passed, and now mother's passed. So Carol's in New York. Her mom, so Carol's mother passed away. Keep that family in prayer. Freddie's doing good. He go back to Dr. Friday. Freddie, go back to Dr. Friday.
Yeah.
And he's doing real well when he needs. So continue to pray for Freddie. Mr. Trails, she got some good news overall with her for the breast cancer and stuff. So you go back when?
To get something that's her, give one what she gets the offer. It's gonna be a little thing. So, that need and expect.
And it did say it's stage 1.
And a week of radiation, so that.
Continue to pray for Mr. Trails.
Amen.
go for this journey in her life. And, Marie, yeah, she'll be traveling this weekend.
Yeah, I go to church with, friend Sandy and Sunday school lady, in the West Side. Name is Mitch Rollins.
I wouldn't remember Pat Mason's, parents came and, Daddy, he had cancer years ago, but they found some stuff, they don't know exactly what's going on then. Actually, the mother could be in the early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia, so remember Pat Mason, his mom and dad, what they did. And continue to pray for our pastor social media, as we, seek the pastor that God has. And, as a pastor.
Excuse me, are you saying Max or Gail is in that church?
Maxie is, he's had some tests and they're trying to make a decision what to do with the test. And then Gail is in the early stage, either dementia or even Alzheimer's. So, yeah, we can pray for some relief from this heat. It's extremely hot. We definitely need some rain. How about all the food?
Well, he came back last night, but I haven't had a chance to talk with him yet.
Okay.
They did some more grafting, but he came back home last night,
Okay. He's a gentleman, 94, 95,
96.
95.
96, 95.
and, he, fell into a fire 2 months ago. Remember Ryan Malthus, he's, I don't know, trying to get him squared away, his, blood sugars off the chart. Last time I talked to him, he said he would put him on insulin for a while and try to get him squared away. And then, on the bike, and Dickie, I always said, on the bike, he's doing well, surgery after he picked up the, thing in the heart, we got one fall, we had to get up to him, and Dickie had some stuff cut off from the head. So,
I'll pray for Brian Horsey,
Brian, who?
Horsey,
Brian, Posty?
the chief of the guy. We got
Anybody else? Brady, you need us a prayer?
Dear God, we just come forward tonight with so many things. Lord, we lift each one up to you, Lord, we know where each one, we lift Carol and Ron, Lord, we went to New York, and we seem like everything was going on up there, Lord, and others, Lord, we just lift that family and the others up, Lord, the ones that, do operations, Lord, I thank you for what you do in my life, Lord, just know that you're in charge, be with us to pass the search community, for find the right one to keep them out, picked out for us. Be with Pastor Jim and Luann and Lord, we thank so much of them as well, Lord, and just be with us, give us a good day, and thanks for everything you do. Amen. Well, hey, hey, good.
But if everything's wrong, you can blame me.
Did you see the peaches? Yeah, it is. She's got peaches. Bushel of peaches. Everybody.
Yeah. Yeah,
We all keep
We don't sing now?
This lady, I'm gonna teach her. I'm gonna teach her this.
What's your mother in your glasses?
I'll do anything. That's okay. Yeah, take that. Try to Yep.
Darling, how are y'all? And you She gets out of my way. Hey, girl.
It was her question, I made the
She's already gone out. I do.
This time.
Y'all going to,
Right now.
you going for your birthday ice cream?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe.
Okay. Thank you, Cat. We're going to see you for that birthday ice cream.